News Talk 106 to 108.
Scientology is defined on its website as a religion that addresses the spirit, not the body or mind. Developed by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard, it goes on to say that man is far more than a product of his environment or his genes. One of the most famous members of the Church of Scientology, Tom Cruise, has spoken passionately about the difference he believes that the Church of Scientology has made to his life.
This world needs help, the kind of help where people can help themselves. Now, I have and will continue to dedicate my life to accomplishing this. And I am supremely grateful to Mr. L. Ron Hubbard for the study technology he provided, because I would not be here today if I didn't get that. And I am honored to be part of the applied scholastics movement, because I know now that I can truly help. And so can you.
And that's Tom Cruise. The belief system of the church has been the subject of much criticism and debate and will again take centre stage when an anti-Scientology conference takes place in Dublin this weekend. The conference, entitled Scientology, Enough is Enough, will feature contributions from a host of ex-members and detractors who question the motives of the church. Now, to talk about this in more detail, I'm joined in studio by Victoria Britton, who is speaking at the conference, and by one of the conference organisers, Pete Griffiths. You're both very welcome to the programme. Now, Pete, first of all, tell me about your experience with Scientology. When and how did you join?
It goes back quite a way, Pat. I was first introduced to the subject in 1987 by my brother, who had become entranced by the subject, and I slowly got interested, lured by the idea that I could improve myself and become a much better person. 7 years later, I was out, and yet I still held the mindset, if you like, for a further 14 years. And it was in 2008 that I began to investigate Scientology for myself by reading the books I'd been told not to read, by researching things that I knew as a Scientologist you weren't supposed to. And eventually I came to realise that it was a con, and that the founder was also a con man. So
L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer, and he set up this religion of Scientology. Just remind people, what is its basis? I mean, who and where is their God?
Well, unlike most religions, they don't actually have a God. And they actually brag that they don't have a God. They do have a set of codes that they claim to live by. The whole of Scientology...
But there must be some set of protocols that they live by. I mean, you know, being a member of the Boy Scouts, you're
Yes.
not a member of a religion, but you're a member of an organisation that has rules and regulations and things that you adhere to. So
That's right. They have a code of honour, they have a code of a Scientologist, which would make for interesting reading.
now, why did you want to improve yourself? I mean, most people, they think, I want to improve myself, I'll go to the gym, or I'll learn a new language. So
Okay.
what was the promise that they were making to you? In what way would you
It
become
wasn't
better?
physical improvement, like gym-type improvement. It was mental improvement and spiritual improvement. So
But what kind of a person were you at the time that thought to himself, I need to be improved?
I was convinced that a higher IQ would benefit me in some ways, and they promised me a higher IQ. You also do a personality test, which I'm sure a lot of people in Ireland have done. And what happens is you answer a series of questions. There's 200. It takes up about an hour of your life to do this. And then they read back over like a chart that shows you where your personality is failing. So it could be failing in the area of, say, communication or happiness. They will actually point out to you, you could be happier. Well, of course, we all could be happier.
Yeah.
And by the time someone's basically analysed you and told you that their solutions could work, you start to give in to the...
I wonder, did they ever say to someone, actually, no, you're pretty perfect, you don't need improvement, you're not for us?
They never say that. They never do.
Now, being a member of the church, and they do call it the Church of Scientology.
They call it a church.
For 7 full years, and then being enthralled to them for a further 14.
Yep.
What did they do with you or to you, or did you simply take courses?
Initially, I took courses and I paid for them. Then I became a staff member. Initially, I was promised I'd make £200 a week. This is back in England.
When 200 was 200.
When it was 200, yeah. I was actually with that organisation or that part of Scientology for 3 years, and I don't think I made £200 the entire time I was there. We would go for weeks with no pay. This is how I've come to lose my house, because we sold the house at the time because we no longer needed it where it was located. And all that money went on keeping us going. I'm not blaming Scientology for that, but if it wasn't for that, we'd have probably starved, So that's just one aspect of it.
Lots of people, though, are members of organisations which will drain them of some of their cash. It could be a sporting organisation with which they're affiliated. It could be any sort of organisation. In other words, pursuing their hobby can cost money. What's wrong with Scientology in your view?
It's more than just a hobby. It becomes a life aim. And one of the things they do pretty early on is you end up believing that Scientology is the only answer to all of mankind's problems.
But, in fairness, the Christian churches may have advanced the Christian churches as the solution to all your ills.
They do, yeah.
Islam will also offer solutions to people and say, this is the way, if you live by this rule,
absolutely, yeah.
You will find it could be eternal happiness rather than temporal happiness, but you'll get there. That's the promise they make. What's different about Scientology?
The major difference is that they sell it to you. They don't just give it away. You can't pick up a Bible or a Quran and read it. They sell you courses step by step, and you have to ascend what they call the bridge, and you supposedly get better and better and much more capable as a person. If you're a businessman, you become a much more efficient businessman. They're selling you this idealized state, if you like. The sad thing is you don't actually achieve it, but you convince yourself that
Tom
you do.
Cruise, a bigger movie star than he was when he joined, one presumes.
Can't disagree. He seems to be doing okay, but then again, I don't know. I don't know too much about Tom's career and the figures, the viewing figures. I have no idea. He's done some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So.
But we can't say the Church of Scientology is responsible for Tom doing crazy or other stuff. When you say you became disillusioned finally, you were enthralled with them even for 14 years after you left their employ,
yes,
as you were employed by them. What was the turning point in 2008 that made you not alone be disenchanted with them, but want to do something about it?
Simply, it was reading books and being allowed to make up my own mind. I think one of the things that I've said many times is that if you really need to make a choice, look at the facts from both sides and make up your own mind, and don't be influenced by other people. Books specifically would be Barefaced Messiah by Russell Miller, and he'll be a guest at the weekend. And also A Piece of Blue Sky by John Atack. He will be doing a Skype interview and Q&A session at the weekend as well. Those two books blew the lid on the whole thing. They're both excellent researchers. They go into the subject. They go into L. Ron Hubbard's life and tell how it is, and they back it up with documentation. So they're not making this stuff up.
Your contention is that Scientology is actually simply a business. I mean, if you're paying for a course and you get a course in return, I mean, you are getting something for your money. The fact that you may or may not be a better person, well, who can judge?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I'll give you an example. They do a communication course, which you'd imagine would improve your communication. I did mine in one weekend, and when I went back to work on the Monday, I was absolutely convinced that my communication was so much better that I started to feel a little bit superior to my workmates. The irony is, I didn't know how to tell them. So here I am thinking that my communication's improved, and I can't talk to my workmates about what I've done, because already my level of reality was different to theirs. And that's the whole thing with Scientology. They believe stuff, and it's not about beliefs, I have to say that, but they hold things dear that any normal person would just go, whoa! And I think that can be researched online as well, some of the craziest stuff.
What do you hope to achieve by this conference?
I would love it if the authorities began to investigate these people.
But for what? I mean, if they're selling books and courses and people buy them, they're adults, they go in, they spend their money, they end up maybe a lot poorer on foot of these self-improvement books and courses. But it's a free country. Some people gamble in Leopardstown and some people
I agree with you.
Drink themselves silly.
People are free to do what they like. However, I would say that in France recently they got found guilty of fraud. They're about to go on trial in Belgium for the same thing.
You also make the point that someone who's broke is really not much used to Scientology because you need to be resourced to pay for these self-improvement courses.
Yes, of course, yeah. You got to pay every step of the way, and each step costs slightly more than the previous step.
Somewhere along the way, though, there have to be people who are making money out of this. I mean, if everyone is a foot soldier, and maybe, if not a foot soldier, a sergeant, or maybe a lieutenant, or maybe a colonel or a major, who at the top is making the big dosh?
David Miscavige. The individual Scientologists I see as victims. They have no idea. They don't know what I know. When I was in, I was actually told not to read certain books and not to listen to certain radio shows or TV shows. When someone's trying to control your information, that's a warning signal. You know.
But this guy, Miscavige,
Yes.
is he living the high life? I mean...
Oh, yes, he is. He wears Egyptian cotton shirts and suits. He has his shoes handmade in London. He flies around in jets with Tom Cruise. He lives the high life. I should be careful about what I say there because I don't know this factually.
Do you believe that it's doing a lot of harm?
Absolutely, without a
I mean,
shred of doubt.
are there not people who maybe are a lot happier being Scientologists than they might have been had they not discovered this
They don't
so-called
look
church?
it. Having said that, though, like when I was in, I was happy enough. But it's only when you start to examine what you've been through and why you are the way you are, why you think the way you think, then you start to see what's been done to you and it starts to unravel. I pray that existing Scientologists look at the facts. Please look at both sides and then make up your own mind.
Now, Victoria Britton is one of the speakers at the conference. Now, you were never a member of the church yourself.
That is correct, Pat. I have never been a member of the Church of Scientology.
But people close to you were?
My ex-husband was a member of the church. He joined when he was young and stayed in for a couple of years. And he always felt he received some benefit from it. But he fled, and this was before we were married. And then when, after we married and we filed for a divorce, he rejoined the Church of Scientology.
Had your divorce anything to do with what he had learned or become as a result of the Church of Scientology?
Well, I never felt like I always felt like he had one foot in the door, like he never really left the Church of Scientology. So, over the years during our marriage, I would hear him use they have their own words that they use, and he would still use those words. And he would also apply different things that he said he had learned when he was in.
So it may or may not have contributed to the disintegration of your marriage, but it happened. What happened after that? Did he return to the Scientology fold?
He most certainly did, and he did with gusto. I mean, he started taking a lot of courses. They had promised him that he wanted to be a better businessman. And he thought Scientology could help him do this. And
did that have any impact on you? I mean, if he was paying alimony, did the alimony stop or anything like that? Were they taking money out of your pocket?
Well, I did not request alimony, but there was conflict because what he was supposed to be doing with that money is putting it aside for his son's college education.
Now, you are speaking for a particular reason at this conference. What are you going to be saying? What are you going to be telling people?
I'm going to talk about an area that I don't think gets enough attention regarding the Church of Scientology. And before I begin, I just want to say that I am a huge advocate of the First Amendment.
The right to free speech.
Absolutely, the right to free speech and also the right to practice a religion of your choice. You have that right. But what I have learned with a certain aspect of the Church of Scientology, it's extremism. And that is their viewpoint on psychiatry, psychotropic medication. It's very extreme. And when someone becomes a member or they're a part of and I'm going to be respectful and say church, a part of their church, a part of what they are told, a part of their belief system is that medications are bad for you. And we're not even talking about just, everyone is really aware of the Tom Cruise and the anti-psychiatry stance that is linked to the Church of Scientology. But what many people do not realize is that you have members who are not being treated for simple illnesses.
But were they here with us in this studio, would they deny all that? The Irish branch of Scientology would say, we never tell people not to take what the doctor has ordered.
Well, I cannot speak for what they would or would not say. I can only share with you my experience, what was told to me by my husband, and as we...
So he was saying it's a tenet of this faith.
Absolutely. I mean, he would not even take an aspirin if he had a headache.
So rather than what might or might not be going on in Ireland, you're saying that your experience in the United States, based on the personal testimony of your husband, was do not take medication, however modest and mild.
Exactly, because what I was told was that it wasn't really a physical ailment, but you were bringing it in to yourself. It was something that you were doing, or you were connected to someone who was creating this illness that whatever it was.
The reason this is important is because of what happened to your son. Tell me that story.
Exactly. Well, my son, he was in college, a really sharp, bright young man, and he had unresolved issues with his relationship with his father, and he wanted to go talk to a counselor, and we found a psychiatrist that he could go and speak to once a week. And he started seeing him, and he was diagnosed, my son was diagnosed with mild depression and anxiety. And he was prescribed an antidepressant called Lexapro. And when his father learned of this, he, of course, became very upset because to him, Kyle would be better treated by taking a therapy of vitamins and joining the Church of Scientology, that they could help him more so than a psychiatrist or a psychotropic medication.
So that was his view, but how did that impact on Kyle?
Well, it had a huge impact on him because here was a young man who wanted to have a relationship with his father. And within this organization, the father was being placed under a tremendous amount of pressure that he would have to either try to get his son to not take these medications, or he would have to disconnect from him and not have anything to do with him.
Take your choice. One is you disconnect from your son, or else you persuade your son not to take the medication.
Exactly.
Simple as that. That was the choice.
Exactly. And the reason that I feel like I have a moral obligation to speak out on this area with the Church of Scientology, because personally, I do not understand, and maybe someday someone from within the Church of Scientology can explain to me how an organization would tell a parent to choose, to have to make a choice like that. You do as we say, with your son, or you cannot have a relationship with him at all.
What happened? Which choice did he make?
What happened was my son was spending time with his father. He was visiting him, and an order was issued that he was to handle his son. And within 36 hours, my son was found dead with from a bullet hole to the head. After he was found, the police discovered his medication locked in the trunk of his father's vehicle.
So he had no access to his medication for 36 hours at least?
At least 36 hours. I had specifically told him, and this is in the court documents, not to interfere with his son's ability to take the medication. And he admits in the court documents that he lied to me, and he was going to do what he wanted to do.
So he withdrew the medication from your son, and the court found that your son had taken his own life.
The court did find that.
You're not saying the Church of Scientology killed your son, but you're saying a sequence of events ended up with your son taking his own life.
That is correct. And when and people have asked me that same question, Pat, and my response, and I did file a wrongful death suit in Clearwater, which was a formidable undertaking, because when you do engage in litigation with the Church of Scientology, it becomes a protracted act of warfare. It's not about justice. It's not even about settling a dispute in a civil manner. It is about destroying you. And there was nothing held back. For me, I was just trying to find out answers. What happened to my son? Because the Clearwater Police Department, who had investigated his death, failed to do this for me. So I had no option but to file a civil suit so I could go in there and depose people.
What was the result of that process? Did you win?
I did not win. It turned into I don't even know how to describe it, a 3-ring circus with the media between the lawyer who was representing the estate and could he or could he not represent Kyle's estate. And it was over something he had signed from another wrongful death suit that was very high profile, and that was the Lisa McPherson case. She had also died in the care of church members. So much of the focus was placed on that. And if we were to start talking about the investigation and what I have uncovered, we would be here until tomorrow morning.
You will be speaking about all of this at the conference.
Yes, I will.
Are you fearful, either of you, Pete or Victoria, that they may come after you for anything you say in the public domain and you'll be once again embroiled in a 3-ring circus?
Well, I am not, because I know that I'm speaking the truth. And whenever I write something or put any information out there, I always put documents to go with it.
So the provenance is always there.
It's always there. I have to believe in the truth and that it still matters in our world.
And Pete, in mounting this conference, have you had any overt hostility? Because any organisation that is attacked in this way, a conference dedicated to damaging it, will surely provoke a response.
Yeah, before I began to criticise Scientology, I had to face the fear of knowing quite what they might do. I do have moments when I question, what am I doing? But thank God the fear's been removed, and I echo what Victoria said there, absolutely.
Finally, I should ask you whether you think it's possible that there are people who are perfectly happy with the Church of Scientology, its methodology, its sharing of your income, shall we put it that way, that they have found some sort of community in which they can be content and happy because they failed to find it elsewhere.
People are free to believe what they wish to believe. My issue with Scientology is simply how they behave, and when that crosses the line, then that should be stopped.
And Victoria, you know, with bearing in mind the freedom to worship as you wish, the freedom to speak as you wish, do you think it's possible that there are very many happy and contented Scientologists?
You know, there could be some who feel they derive some benefit from it. Absolutely. I would not take that from them. But what it does not, and as I share my son's story more and the aftermath with the investigation and what transpired in Clearwater, Florida, it does not mean that they are above the law. It does not mean that the rules do not apply to them like they do for all people. And that's within and I'm speaking, of course, of the United States, within the judicial system. Within our, we have an expectation, justice and fairness for all. And because of this element of fear that they have, people are very much afraid of them. And they don't have the right to do that. They don't have the right to do that. It's wrong. And I think it needs to be exposed and it needs to be stopped.
Victoria Britton and Pete Griffiths, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Pat.